Postmodernism is a layered set of theories. The view of human nature in postmodernism, again, not exactly like Marx, but has some similarities. It's considered, though, a function of social conditions. For Marx, again, it was about the mode of production and the relations of production. He thought it was a function of class culture. But postmodernism sees human nature as constructed by all social interactions. And this is another term that you probably have heard, but it's socially constructed. So we are socially constructed. So that means, and I wouldn't, again, this is just an example of a textbook example of what this means. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but it means that your identity is determined by your place in this power grid that I showed. And it's endlessly fluid. It depends on the forces that are acting upon you. This is what postmodernists mean when they say that our identities are socially constructed. There's no sable. You are constantly being constructed by the forces of power around you. So this strikes at the heart of identity. We're going to talk more about that, and also Frank will as well. Then the argument, as I said, the postmodernists, they gave up on Marxism and they weren't that focused on class. Rather, instead, they focus on race and gender. And that's why all the discussion in the culture today is about what? It's about race and gender. And especially, anyway, we'll get there. So the social construction of race, it says that my identity is based on the social meaning people have attached to it. It's not based on any of my immutable characteristics. Right? My race has less to do with my skin pigment and more to do with the place assigned to me in the power grid. That's what essentially postmodernism believes. And the same is true for gender. Society imposes on me the definition of what it means to be a boy or girl, a man or woman, and expects me to conform to it. So it's setting up this structure where power is defining you, and what is your response? Is to resist or to fight. So yes, there are similarities with Marx's dialectic, but it does have this built-in, this kind of notion of struggle, but again, it's coming from a different source. So I call this the founding myth of postmodernism, and what do I mean by that? They assert, as Frank mentioned in his previous lecture, axiomatically, that there's no truth, everything is relative, and all identity is social constructed. So it's mythic in the sense that these are not ideas for which they argue, it's beliefs which they accept that don't need to be argued or demonstrated, but merely asserted, right? They are the founding principles, and in that way they have mythic resonance. But I will say this, they're not yet an ideology, as you recall from our previous lecture. This is the philosophy, right? But not yet an actionable political agenda. But anyway, that's coming. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this person, Kimberly Crenshaw. She's the one who, we're going to talk about her in a minute, who created the idea of intersectionality. I just want to say, like with the French and Bolsheviks, philosophy doesn't make revolutions. It takes ideology and a political program. So beginning in the 1990s and 2000s, postmodern philosophy was adopted by the race and gender theorists at the university. I studied with some of these people, and they previously largely been Marxist. Kimberly Crenshaw was a student of Derek Bell, who was the founder of critical race theory, who was a Marxist, but she transformed it on the basis of postmodernism. This is Judith Butler, who I also studied with, and she's an important gender theorist, and like the critical race theorist, she replaced class-based critiques of Marxism and adopted the postmodern philosophy as the basis for the revolutionary gender ideology. Butler was and is a key figure in gender theory and also queer theory. Her book, Gender Trouble, is a seminal work in that field. Right? These are two of many key people who transitioned the race and gender theory based now on postmodernism. What comes from that? What are the implications? So as we've seen, the postmodernists rejected truth, which included the Enlightenment idea. They're actually post-Enlightenment. They rejected the Enlightenment idea of objective truth and science. And we'll see some examples of that in a minute. They argued that objective truth and the Enlightenment culture was oppressive to marginalized groups. In the absence of this objective truth, which they reject, it is my experience, my truth. You heard that one? Yeah, and that's the ground of the woke ideology. It's based on experience. Their truth, the truth of their experience is that they're oppressed, because that's how they feel. So truth is replaced by their truth. And there's a new cogito. This is actually a book I haven't had a chance to pick up yet, a new one. And it's changed from I think, therefore I am, to I feel, therefore I am. This is the transition from Enlightenment to post-Enlightenment thought. This is a critique, but still. Basically, the new founding myth is I feel oppressed, therefore I am oppressed. Of course, this is not to suggest that there's no discrimination in the world and everybody's equal and we all get along. I'm just saying that this is the philosophy behind the current woke ideology. And now I'm going to look at some of the elements that exist in what is woke ideology. First, I would say, is standpoint theory. And again, this has to do with my experience. It's another example. Nancy Hartsock was the founder, another person I studied with. And she originally came up with this idea as a Marxist. She was a Marxist, but it has later been adopted by the race and gender theorists. And it suggests that my standpoint, my view, my perspective is the place from which I critically view the world. And so you don't have my experience, so you can't evaluate my truth. You have nothing to say about my truth. And one that has become huge is this notion of white supremacy. So the point of standpoint theory is this. As a non-white person, and I'm going to play that role here just for a second. I can't play it for very long, but I see you and your culture as focusing on perfectionism, quantity over quality, individualism, objectivity, and a right to comfort, and all these other items. That's what white culture is. That's what white supremacy is. Right now, unfortunately for you, you have nothing to say about this because it's not your experience. You don't experience white supremacy if you're white, and probably even not if you're Asian. It's a little fuzzy there, but actually when I was young, we used to call it stereotyping, and we thought it was a bad thing, but now it's in vogue. Because knowledge is not based on an objective standard, this objectivity is a white trait, then it's based on experience, and this is my experience of you, which has led to the idea that white people are fragile because you can't talk about these things. If you're white, you don't know how to talk about them. First of all, again, it's not your experience, so you don't know anything about it, and you can't even have a conversation about it. Now, to be clear, a conversation means listening to people tell you about your white supremacy, right? It's not a dialogue. Don't get a crazy idea like that. But it means that you understand your white supremacy. And if you don't understand it, if you resist it, you're just demonstrating your white supremacy. Right? It's a good hustle. I got to give them that. It's a good hustle. All right. And look, because racial issues look, our society has everybody here in the world, and we've made some tremendous progress, but let's not kid ourselves. We have a long way to go still before we truly can express the right heart of love towards each person. So there's a point there about which we have some discomfort. Okay, so that's the standpoint theory. The next one is mapping oppression. As you can see here, there's a line of domination, and this is a binary here. I can't leave the microphone, but if you see each corresponding topic below is somebody who's oppressed, and there's a line pointing to the oppressor up above, right? This is actually, I kid you not, I make this not up. This is being taught at the universities. This is created by an academic by the name of Catherine Pauley Morgan. Catherine's no longer with us, but this is the state of education. But actually, even this is too binary, and Kimberly Crenshaw came up with this notion of intersectionality. They love grids. So each one of these areas represents an area of oppression, a potential area of oppression. Let me read a quote. This is Kimberly's quote. This is just an honest rendering of what she says. Intersectionality is a lens through which you can see where power comes and collides. Again, she's Foucauldian now. Where it locks and intersects. It is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and privilege. All right. The mapping was a little too one-dimensional. This one, again, it's a manifestation of Foucault's power grid. Wherever you are in this area, there's areas of oppressing and oppression, right? And that's the state of the art now. This is at the core of what's being taught now as critical race theory, which has led some wags to come up with the Oppression Olympics. So if you can identify who's the most oppressed person, then you win. Anyway, on the one hand, I get it. Anyway, I better let that go. It does suggest, though, that there's a level of this that's just maybe a little bit ridiculous.